You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
We're officially done with bye weeks, and it is time now to turn our attention to Week 15 of the NFL. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time once again to make picks for the NFL. Sitting on a record of 129-79, coming off of a wild weekend of upsets. We finished 8-7, so above 500, but well below where I like to be when it comes to making picks. We're always shooting for double-digit correct predictions. So make sure you comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on my picks. Let me hear your picks. And remember, in case you did not know this, I do this for fun. I'm not a gambling guru by any means. I just like to talk football with you all. So, I cannot emphasize that enough. Now, beginning with the very first game of this week, Thursday Night Football, we have the LA Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas here. We have two offenses that struggle to run the football. One that has a rookie quarterback. The other one has a backup quarterback. Easton Stick as the starter now that it sounds like Justin Herbert is done for the season. And we got two defenses that find success in completely different ways, as the Chargers have a little bit of a better run defense, whereas the Raiders are better more so in terms of defending against the pass. But looking at this matchup here, man, I've got to say this is one of the tougher ones to pick here, especially now with Easton Stick out. Maybe it would have been a little bit easier knowing Justin Herbert was under center for the Chargers, but with Easton Stick in and also Keenan Allen listed as out for this as well, I mean, the Raiders have a shot, and I think their biggest question going into this matchup here is just whether or not they can avoid the ugly turnovers that they've been dealing with all season long, as they are currently sitting at 24, which is tied for second most in the NFL. So if they can avoid turning the football over here, I think they got a really good shot at an upset, and that's, considering they just came off of a 3-0 loss where they really could not do anything offensively just last week against the Minnesota Vikings. However, the Chargers defense is not the Vikings defense, where the Vikings have one of the best run defenses in the NFL and are pretty solid against the pass as well. The Chargers have one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL, so I do think Aiden O'Connell can potentially find some success against that 29th ranked passing D, allowing about 261 yards per game. I will note, though, that there are some injuries that have me a little bit concerned regarding the Raiders in this one here. Left tackle Colton Miller and center Andre James are both listed as out. And on top of that, you have Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, and Josh Jacobs all listed as questionable, with Devontae Adams more so being an illness issue than anything else. So as long as he's feeling all right and he can be hydrated, hopefully he ends up playing here. But I do think that Raiders have a shot, and I think that getting the Chargers minus Justin Herbert, and in the situation that they are currently sitting in, they could come away with a victory here. Now, if the Chargers were to find a way to success and get themselves a victory here, it's probably going to be through the ground game. The Raiders' run defense is not necessarily great. They are 25th in the NFL, allowing about 127 yards a game, so there is that to kind of look at here. But I think I'm going Raiders. I expect that Devontae Adams is going to be good to go. Again, I know he was held out because of injury, but overall, I like what the Raiders' chances are in this game here, especially catching the Chargers now minus Justin Herbert. I think that the Chargers with Justin Herbert have been pretty underwhelming offensively, and now without him, I don't really see how it gets better. So I'll give the edge to the Raiders 20-17 in a nice Thursday Night Football matchup. Moving into the Saturday triple header now, we're looking at the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in the jungle of Cincinnati, as Jake Browning, coming in with two back-to-back excellent performances, goes up against a Vikings team that, like I just mentioned when we were talking the Raiders, are coming off of a 3-0 victory in what was one dud of a football contest, and are now searching for answers at quarterback, having benched Josh Dobbs during that 3-0 victory. Vikings defense has been on a bit of a run, so if you are looking at who has the better defense here, I almost might side with the Vikings on this one. 5th in terms of run defense in the NFL, and also 5th in points per game allowed. I do think that there is a clear edge for the Vikings here, and if there was somebody to maybe put a stop to the Jake Browning, hype train, if you force this defense into being one-dimensional, the passing defense is about middle-of-the-road average, sitting at 14th in the NFL. If they can bring some pressure, maybe get a sack or two here or there, disrupt what Jake Browning has been doing, and we all know the Bengals aren't necessarily the best in the NFL at protecting the quarterback, I think the Vikings have a reasonable chance here. But I do think that the one thing that really sticks out to me, and I think could pose a problem for a Vikings team that is, again, kind of in a bit of a quarterback limbo right now because of benching Josh Dobbs, Cincinnati loves to force takeaways. They have 21 on the season, and they have 1 takeaway in each of their last 3 games in 5 total in their last 5 games. Vikings are second worst in the NFL when it comes to turnovers, having 24 on the season. I do think that could be a problem if they're going up against a stingy defense like the Cincinnati Bengals, maybe coming away with an opportunistic interception or a forced fumble. I will note that Chase and Boyd are both limited in practice as of Wednesday, so that is something worth watching for the Bengals here. And Justin Jefferson is expected to play. Hopefully this time he gets to play the whole game and does not run into any other injury concerns. But I do think I like the Bengals in Cincinnati right now. Jake Browning has just been such a great surprise for the team, and he's done a really good job in the absence of Joe Burrow. And you have so much talent on offense for Jake Browning to work with, and he's clearly comfortable working in that offense there. I think I'm going to go Bengals on this one, 24-16. Give them a win in the home jungle of Houday Nation. Next, we'll take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts here. And this is another one of those where both teams are coming off of pretty ugly losses. Colts to the Bengals we were just talking about, and the Steelers now dropping a game to the New England Patriots team that I honestly thought was going to finish the season with maybe only 2 victories. And on top of that, it sounds like the Steelers are going to continue the Mitch Trubisky train, and I don't really know why. I feel like at this point, you have Mason Rudolph, who has I'm sorry if I sound like I'm losing my voice. I literally recorded this once already and realized I didn't hit record, so I feel like my voice is a little shot here, so please bear with me. But I'm a little bit curious as to why they're not opting to maybe give Mason Rudolph a try here. But I'm assuming that if things go south again offensively for Pittsburgh, we might wind up seeing Mitch Trubisky pulled and maybe getting a little bit of Mason Rudolph action. And then you have the Colts, who are basically looking for a rebound against after what they did against the Cincinnati Bengals last week, which was not a whole lot. I feel like the Colts offense has very much overperformed over expectations this year, especially after losing Anthony Richardson. I did not really give the Colts much of a shot. In fact, I was basically calling for them to just kind of lose out the rest of the season, get some better players in the draft, and then try to run it back with an improved unit with Anthony Richardson next year. However, offense has been really good this year. 24 points per game puts them in the top 10 of the NFL, but after running into the Bengals last week, I'm a little bit concerned about how they fare against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. It's allowing under 20 points a game, actually closer to 19 than anything else. I think if Pittsburgh wants to come away victorious in this matchup, they've got to lean into the run game. The Colts' run defense has not been good this year, and on top of that, even though Grover Stewart was back in the lineup last week, they still allowed 111 yards on the ground to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's not necessarily known for running the football very effectively. They're currently averaging a league second worst, 84 yards a game, so it's not like they have the most potent rushing attack over there in Cincinnati. And I think that if you dive into your 1-2 punch of thunder and lightning over there in your running back room, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have a good shot of maybe making a little bit of a bounce back and some noise against a Colts run defense that ranks 26th in the NFL. I do think that if the Colts want to find some success here against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've got to protect the football, because whenever the Colts start to force turnovers, I think that's where things get really, really ugly for them, and it becomes problematic. They have 20 turnovers so far this season, and the Steelers currently sit on 21 takeaways, which ties them for 7th most in the NFL, so a top 10 unit in terms of turnovers forced. That could be problematic. So if the Colts can protect the football, I do think that they have a really good opportunity to win this game, and especially if they're able to shut down the passing attack in Pittsburgh, which, again, has not really been too difficult for anyone this year, but is something that I think could lead to success for Indianapolis. A couple of injuries I'm looking at for this game as well that I do think have significant weight are going to be, for the Steelers, Alex Highsmith and wide receiver Deontay Johnson on the offensive side of the ball. And then for the Colts, their defense, DeForest Buckner is listed as questionable right now. So all 3 of those guys I think are impact players for both of these sides. And if hypothetically the Steelers wind up losing Alex Highsmith and Deontay Johnson in this game, I think it really starts to swing in Indianapolis' favor, especially being in Indianapolis. I know the Colts are only sitting at 2-4 at home this year, but being at home in this situation, with all things considered, kind of benefits Indy here. So I'm leaning Indianapolis, but this is one where I would not be shocked where if the game goes either way. I could see the Colts maybe running into another wall offensively against a pretty good Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but I just have a really hard time based off the last couple of weeks and what we've seen from this Steelers offense buying into them. So I'll take Indy 21-13 in a somewhat comfortable victory. Somewhat. Keyword, somewhat. Next, we'll look at the Denver Broncos and the Detroit Lions going head-to-head, this one in Detroit. Now, the defense of the Lions, as of late, has been absolutely reeling. They have allowed no less than 330 yards total and 26 points per game in the last 5. Or not points per game, excuse me, just points in general, 26 at least. Denver, on the other side, has not allowed more than 22 points since week number 5. Their defense the last 10 weeks has been on a roll, or 9 weeks, I guess you should say. So over 2 months now at this point, a completely different unit from what we saw that first month that was getting embarrassed and having 70 points dropped on them. I think the turnover differential is definitely worth looking at here in this matchup. Denver currently sitting at +6 to the Lions -6. If Detroit can slow down the turnovers, I think they have a better shot, but you're currently looking at 10 turnovers in your last 4 games by the Lions offense, and that is concerning against this Denver defense that can be pretty aggressive and is not afraid to go after the football. I think that one thing I will be looking at as far as matchup goes is going to be the Lions' run game versus the run defense of the Denver Broncos. They've allowed about 90.5 yards per game in the last 3 games, which is obviously far lower than the season average of 144. That's a bit bloated from that first month of the season. But I do think that with the way the Lions run the football, with their 1-2 bunch at running back with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, could be an interesting matchup to watch. And then on the flip side of things, I'll be looking at the Lions' pass defense against the Broncos' passing attack. When you look at what the Lions defense has allowed, and they've been pretty leaky as of late, going back to like the Ravens game, you have 250 yards allowed versus the Saints, and they are not good at throwing the football. You have 270 yards allowed to the Packers during that stretch that they've been having of pretty decent success. You had a 323-yard game allowed against the Chargers, 357 against the Ravens. I do think that Russell Wilson, with the clean play that he's had for the majority of the season here, has an opportunity to take advantage, especially when you look at that connection he has with Courtland Sutton right now. It's a thing of beauty. And if that running game gets going over there and starts to open things up in the pass, Detroit could be in trouble defensively. As for who I think is going to win this game, though, and come out victorious, I know a lot of people are probably leaning Detroit, and it's in Detroit at that. They're favorites in the matchup here. But I'm feeling the Broncos. Something is telling me that the Broncos are catching the Lions at the right time. So I think I'm going to take Denver for the win. I think we're going to see a little bit more points than maybe expected, as I have Denver winning 28-23 in a pretty fun contest. Next, we'll take a look at the Chicago Bears being hosted by the Cleveland Browns, who are sitting at 6-1 at home, mind you. So a good opportunity to rattle off another victory and continue your fight into the playoff race within the AFC. Whereas the Chicago Bears on the road have not been great this year. With 5 wins on the season, only 2 of them have come when they are road dogs, and they're 5 losses of their 8 on the road. So a little bit of concern for Chicago going to this one here against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Joe Flacco named the starter the rest of the way for the Browns, and honestly, at this point, I think he's earned it, putting 2 excellent games together, the 2 best performances, I guess you could say, for a quarterback so far this season from Cleveland, and honestly, since the Deshaun Watson era basically started in Cleveland, but he's on the practice squad, and I don't think I've ever seen that before. I don't know how your starter is sitting on the practice squad, because teams can make an offer and just snatch him up, and it would honestly be hilarious if a division rival or just anyone, if like the Steelers were like, hey, Flacco, come play for us. Like, imagine that. I don't understand why he's over there. I don't know if it's some sort of like roster, like magic or whatever that I don't understand. I don't know. But why is he on the practice squad? Couldn't tell you. As for the Bears, coming into this game here, defense, week in and week out since the trade deadline, continues to breathe life into this unit and has made things exciting for them in Chicago. And on top of that, the offense themselves is even starting to warm up a little bit. I think that whoever's run game finds more success helps lead their team to victory in this one here. You have 2 really good rushing attacks. Chicago ranks 4th and Cleveland ranks 7th. Obviously, Chicago's geared a little bit more towards the fact that Justin Fields, is able to move with his legs and create some problems for defenses here. So I will be curious as to who ends up running the ball more effectively. And it's not like there aren't 2 good run defenses on the opposite side of those rushing attacks. Bears are 2nd in the NFL right now. Browns are sitting at 11th. So we have 2 really good run units going up against 2 really good run defenses. It'll be a fun matchup to watch on both sides. And then a question I have in this one here, because I'm curious. I know there's a lot of questions surrounding the ability of Justin Fields and his ability to throw the football. If Joe Flacco continues to throw the ball the way he has the last couple of weeks, which has totaled up to nearly 550 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a couple of interceptions, and I'm pretty sure one of those was like a garbage end of first half throw, I don't know if Chicago can keep up through the air. They're averaging only 186 yards per game through the air, which is good for 26th in the NFL. So if Joe Flacco's on, and the Bears pass defense is ranked 23rd in the NFL right now, granted that's probably getting a little bit skewing upward a little bit because the defense has been a little bit better over the last few weeks. I'm kind of curious how this game ends up looking if it turns into like an aerial type of fight. Except I don't really envision something like that, but it is something just kind of that I have in the back of my mind in case it does end up happening. I will be curious to see. I do think it's also worth noting, and this is something that I could think would sway things into the direction of the Chicago Bears, is that the Browns are now without both of their starting offensive tackles, having lost Jedrick Willis earlier in the season, and now DeJuan Jones is being placed on the IR, with Chicago managing 11 sacks in their last 4 weeks of play, with Montez Sweat being a big part of that. He has 3.5 himself of those 11. That could definitely sway things in Chicago's favor and ultimately winds up being the reason why maybe this passing attack that's starting to emerge in Cleveland doesn't necessarily get off the ground during this matchup against the Bears. As for who I think is going to win, though, here, I really have a hard time picking against this Cleveland defense, especially at home. And their track record at home speaks for itself, being 6-1. I could see the defense giving the Chicago Bears some issues, but I could also see the Bears defense, as I said, starting to catch fire the last few weeks, maybe give the Browns some trouble, but I have the Browns winning 23-20. I expect this one to be a tight contest. I think it'll be a really good matchup and a very interesting one at that because you have a lot of really good units going head-to-head here. Looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers, though, we have ourselves a team that is 6-7 going up against a team that is 6-6, both still very much in the hunt for some playoff positions, and both parties involved definitely need to come away with a victory here. The Bucs, for what it's worth, the last 3 weeks, they've been one of the worst run offenses in the NFL. They have not really been able to run the football, but in the last 3 weeks of play have averaged about 133 yards on the ground. And the reason I bring that up is because the Packers boast one of the league's worst run defenses, allowing a whopping 141 yards per game, which is good for 31st in the NFL. And that's coming off the heels of a 209-yard game that they allowed against the Giants last week. So if the Bucs can hit the ground running, they have a shot against this defense. I do think, though, that the Packers' passing attack, after hitting a snag last week, could have a bounce-back game here as well. When you look at what the Buccaneers do defensively, they allow teams to move the football through the air pretty handedly at that, allowing 264 yards per game, which is good for 30th in the NFL. So both sides have an area of not expertise, but they both have an area of offense that they've been very successful with as of late. And their opponents' defenses seem to struggle defending that. So this will be an interesting contest to kind of see how it plays out. Can the passing attack of Green Bay outmatch the rushing game that's kind of just emerged out of nowhere for Tampa Bay? Very curious to watch. Both these teams protect the football very well offensively, both being in the top 10 in terms of turnovers allowed this season offensively. They don't really turn the football over much. So I think one thing that could be very key to this matchup is who makes that costly mistake when it matters most, especially like crunch time when you get into that fourth quarter. Both teams, fairly long injury reports as well, so I definitely think that's worth keeping an eye on. I pick so early in the week that it kind of shoots me in the foot, but if you're somebody who waits till Sunday, wait to let these injury reports kind of sort themselves out. Because if you look at both teams' injury reports, like I'm not going to get into the names because they're both like a mile long. Take a look at them and just see how many guys are potentially going to miss action here. I think that could seriously sway in either direction based off of how many people are and are not out on both ends. As for who I'm picking, though, I'm definitely leaning more towards the Packers here. I just think the passing attack is a lot more impressive than what Tampa Bay has. And if they get rolling again, Jordan Love looked really good going into that Giants game. And again, I know the Giants defense gave them a bit of an issue, but overall, I think the Packers are a little bit of a better team, especially just overall. So I'll take Packers 21-20, tight contest. Would I be shocked if Tampa Bay pulled off an upset? Absolutely not, because the Packers could be reeling from that loss. But I think Packers, a little bit of a safer selection in my opinion. Looking at the Houston Texans now being hosted by the Tennessee Titans. This is one of those games that's a little bit complicated because CJ Stroud potentially being out with concussion could make things very difficult for Houston to win here. And I'm picking so far out, I don't know if CJ Stroud's going to be playing or not. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence of like, my pick would be probably the Texans if CJ Stroud is playing, but I don't know if he is. So right now I'm kind of leaning Tennessee because of just the fact that they're not going to have CJ Stroud in Houston, and Tennessee's coming in hot right now. Massive victory over the Miami Dolphins. Offense looked really good. Defense was opportunistic when it needed to be. I'm not really sure. And when I kind of look at the game here, Tennessee all they really need to do is just kind of get things going on the ground in like a half-decent manner to try to open things up and try to get things moving against the passing defense of the Texans, which has not necessarily been great this year. They're really good against stopping the run, and if they can just break through that, Tennessee that is, 26 in the NFL in terms of passing yards per game allowed for Houston. Will Levis might have another good game. He looked really good last week, and it was against what people would consider a better passing defense in Houston, so something to keep an eye on. And if CJ Stroud's not playing, they're going to have to try to find a way to run the football, and they have not been great running the football this year. They're averaging about 96 yards per game right now, and I don't really know if I can buy the Houston Texans run game to lead them to success and open things up for Davis Mills or Case Keenum, whoever gets the football if Stroud's not playing. So it's tough because if Stroud's in, I really like the Texans, but if he's not, I really like the Titans on this one here. So I almost want to throw an asterisk on here and be like, if Stroud's in, I want Houston. If he's not, I want Tennessee. But I'm going to abide by me making my picks now. I'm going to go with the scenario that Stroud doesn't play because I feel like we haven't really seen guys come back within the same week of getting a concussion, especially at the quarterback position. I think Stroud maybe misses a game. Tennessee being opportunistic and 4-2 at home, a better unit at home when they are on the than they are on the road. I'll take the Titans 21-13. Now we're taking a look at the New York Jets being hosted by the Miami Dolphins, who had their winning streak snapped somewhat embarrassingly this past week on Monday Night Football to the Tennessee Titans we just selected to be victorious this week, going up against the Jets team who is coming off of their best offensive performance of the season. And I go into this game hoping, sincerely hoping, that the Dolphins learned their lesson in overlooking opponents and looking ahead towards further matchups down the road. I don't know what caused that loss and what caused them to put themselves in a situation where you're going up against a Titans team, and I previewed this last week too. The Titans were averaging 11.5 points per game on the road this season going into that matchup, and the Dolphins at home were putting up nearly 40 points a game. There was like no reason other than just not being ready for the matchup and the Titans coming in and just being more physical than you were and losing that game. And sure enough, the Dolphins found a way. Now, looking at this matchup here, the Jets come in, like I said, best offensive performance they've had all season, putting up 30 on the board. Wilson also went 302 yards and a couple of touchdowns despite being sacked 4 times. Probably one of the best games of Zach Wilson's career to this point. And Miami has allowed over only 300 yards passing for the first time since week number 4 coming out of that game against Tennessee. So if you're sitting there saying, hey, the Jets might have a shot, I totally understand why. There's like some things brewing right now when you look at the numbers and everything, just the situation. I could see why. And on top of that, Tyreek Hill, listed as day-to-day, questionable right now. He is like the engine of this offense. I would be slightly worried if I'm a Dolphins fan. However, Miami does have a very effective running attack, and they can get it done on the ground, averaging about 144 yards per game right now. Second best running game in the NFL to this point. While the Jets have had back-to-back strong performances against both Houston and Atlanta against the run, for the most part, they have been really bad against the run in general throughout the entirety of the season. On their average, they're allowing about 131 yards per game. And the first time these two teams matched up, Miami had 167 yards rushing on the day. So I am concerned a little bit going into this game here that maybe like the Dolphins are still licking their wounds, or I hope to God they're still not looking ahead. And again, I hope that they learned their lesson about that last week. I expect a bounce back game. I think whether Miami is able to throw the football as well as they normally do is kind of irrelevant because the first matchup they played, like I said, they didn't really run or pass the football that effectively anyways. It was really about that run game and what they did on the ground. I think you can take it up front to the New York Jets. They should come back with a victory. Big bounce back. Get yourself back into the right direction. Try to, wipe the taste out of your mouth from that tough loss last week. I'll take the Dolphins 30-17. Should be a fun contest. And this is one of those that like the score, I think makes the game look further apart than it actually is. Like, I don't think it's going to be 30-17 quickly. I think it's like we're talking 23-17 late and Miami gets to put the dagger in to make the score look bigger than the actual, or the further apart than the game actually was. Now we have ourselves the Kansas City Chiefs being hosted by the New England Patriots here. Initially, a primetime football game being flexed out to the 1 p.m. spot on Fox. The Chiefs need this game. More than anyone needs a game this week right now. After the explosive kind of meltdown that we saw on the sideline with the Chiefs last week here and that ugly loss to Buffalo, this is the get-right game that the Chiefs kind of desperately need right now, and thankfully you're going up against a Patriots team while they are coming off of a, fun win over the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. Offensively, they only showed up for one half of the game. Second half, they completely were gone, and it was basically just, let's keep the Steelers from catching up so we can pull off this victory here. So the Chiefs need this game to kind of right the ship in the right direction after that loss to Buffalo, and I think that they do get it here. I expect the Chiefs to be able to come in and throw the ball pretty effectively. Hopefully, less drops, less miscues, less just, stupid mistakes here or there. I'm out to a better performance from the Chiefs offensively this week. And I will be interested to see how the Patriots' run defense fares in this matchup against Kansas City. And the reason I bring that up is because they are the third best run D in the NFL. And Isaiah Pacheco is probably one of the angriest runners I've ever seen ever in the history of running in general. So I'll be curious to see how they match up well, because it has been like one of the lone bright spots to a pretty dark season for the New England Patriots. But overall, this is a game the Chiefs should come in. They should be angry. And after seeing the way Patrick Mahomes kind of, had his moment in the spotlight, I think that everyone around him should have taken a look in the mirror, sat down with themselves and gone, all right, we need to lock in, because clearly he is, and he's fed up with dragging this team back to a playoff berth and to a defending run for their Super Bowl title. It's been ugly in Kansas City to this point, but I almost feel like what we saw last week was like a necessary evil, something to kind of get everyone's head in the right direction and get everyone to kind of lock in and realize, we're not just going to get back to the Super Bowl because we're defending champs. So it kind of felt like it needed to happen. So I'm very curious to see how the Chiefs respond after all of that adversity going forward. Oh, and as I was saying, I have the Chiefs winning the game here. I feel like that's important to mention too. Chiefs win. I have them winning 28-14. Next game we're looking at here, we have ourselves the New York Giants taking on the New Orleans Saints. And this is one of the tougher games to pick this week because it's not as simple as just taking New Orleans because they're at home in New Orleans. No, because they're only 3-3 at home. And the Giants are pretty hot right now. Tommy Cutlets has led the Giants to 3 straight wins. Saquon Barkley coming off 86 yards and a couple of touchdowns against Green Bay last week. Defense just essentially pulled to a stop the freight train that was the hot Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love's passing attack. There is a lot of reason to like the Giants in this game, especially as an underdog, where a lot of people might be coming in not expecting it. Maybe just a stroke of luck here or there for the Giants with things bouncing in their favor. But the Giants have gotten it done the last 3 weeks, and winning the game last week the way they did, I think should put like a little bit of an emphasis on what they're doing, because good teams win games like that. Bad teams do not. And I think that's really important to highlight when you look at how that game ended between the Packers and Giants last week. The Saints offense, on top of that, continues to underperform week in and week out. It's like the defense is essentially dragging the offense, kicking and screaming throughout this entire playoff race here in a fight in what is a 3-way tie right now of 6 and 7 teams in the NFC South. It's not as clear as just picking New Orleans for the win here. However, I will say this, though, and this is kind of what helps me lean towards New Orleans more than anything else. If there was a defense that I was to count on to essentially shut down whatever it is that's brewing over there in New York, I'd probably take the Saints defense. They love to force takeaways. They are sitting on 22 this season, good for 5th most in the NFL. 14 of those takeaways have been interceptions, which is good for 3rd most in the NFL. They force teams into mistakes, and typically it's in areas where, for as bad as the offense has been, it's typically flipping the field and giving the offense short fields to work with to get them into position to get some points on the board off of those turnovers. So if I had to pick a unit, it's going to be the Saints unit to maybe shut down the party we've been seeing in New York the last few weeks. I'm all for a Giants win here. I would love to see it happen, but something is telling me bet on the Saints defense on this one here. I feel like they get it done again. They have done it a lot for them this season, and while they are sitting at only 6 and 7, we do have to remember the Giants are sitting at 4 and 8, albeit on a 3-game winning streak. So I'll give the credit where it's due and acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged, but I do like the Saints. I have them winning 21-14. Next, we have ourselves the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Carolina Panthers in an NFC South clash. And if I had to pick one team in the NFL to blow their game against the Carolina Panthers, it would probably be the version of the Atlanta Falcons that we are currently seeing right now, as they seem to love to blow games when they should be winning. On top of that, Atlanta has 2 wins on the road this season, so would not be surprised. However, with the state of the Carolina Panthers right now, it feels like they are en route to losing out the rest of the way. Could there be another win? Maybe even 2 in their pocket? Maybe, but I'm not quite sure. It's really going to come down to, can Carolina maybe take advantage of the untimely turnovers that the Atlanta Falcons seem to be prone to having, whether it's late in the game or somewhere like inside their own 30. The Falcons seem to love to turn the football over offensively. However, Carolina only has 9 takeaways this season, the only team in the NFL with single-digit takeaways 14 weeks into the season, a league worst. So it's a matter of, can they capitalize on that? Can they slow down the Falcons' run game? And I'm not quite sure. The Falcons, for what it's worth, despite their offensive struggles, they're very good at running the football, 6th best in the NFL, in fact. And Carolina has allowed teams to cross 100 yards in all but 3 games this season on the ground. And Atlanta had 130 yards rushing the first time these 2 teams played. So it'll be one of those things where it's just a matter of, can the Panthers capitalize? Can they fight through their demons on defense with their struggles in the ground, on the ground game, or against the ground game rather? And I'm not quite sure. But don't sleep on Carolina. Just do not, especially with the way this Falcons team plays. Their passing attack just scares me. Every single time Desmond Ridder drops back, I'm fearful for what is going to be the end result of that play. And Carolina, for everything that has been bad this year, does boast the 3rd best passing defense in the NFL. If I'm Atlanta, go with your strengths and go against the weakness you know is there. Do not test the passing defense of the Panthers. Again, they don't force a ton of turnovers, but they are very good at shutting down the pass, and that has been the lone bright spot for them this season. That and maybe Chuba Hubbard finding his footing here in the back half of the season. I have the Falcons winning 20-13, but I will not be surprised if the Falcons find a way to lose this game. I will not be surprised. Moving into the late window of Sunday now, we're looking at Washington being hosted by the Los Angeles Rams here, as the Rams offense, since Kyren Williams has returned, is alive and flourishing. I don't even know if saying well is good enough. Flourishing is the term I want to use here. Whereas when you look at Washington, they're in a tough situation. They're coming off of 3 straight games where they have scored no more than 19 points in those 3 games. Coupled that with the fact that the Commanders boast the league's worst defense in terms of points per game allowed, sitting at 30.5 points. I have a very hard time buying a Commanders victory in this match here. It just does not seem very realistic. And when you look at the way things have gone for Washington, 58 sacks allowed this season. Turnovers have been a nightmare. They've had at least 1 turnover since week 6. That's now going on, 8 weeks now that we've seen them turn the football over at this point. They have 5 games this season with 2 or more turnovers on top of that. I don't really know how you side with the Commanders at this point anymore. They were competitive at times earlier in the season. They had some really good games against the Eagles and a few other ones mixed in here or there, but at this point, you need Washington to be mistake-free, have a perfect passing attack, protect their quarterback, and you're asking for a lot of things that Washington just has not been able to do. And right now, with the way the Rams are, defensively, they're like middle of the road, and honestly, it feels like slightly getting a little bit better. I know that they had one hell of a time defending the Ravens last week, but it's the Baltimore Ravens, so I'll cut them some slack there. But I mean, they're 20th in the NFL in terms of points per game, and that's a number that feels like it's been going down, which is good. And then they're 10th in the NFL in terms of points per game and scoring, 23 points average. Pretty solid number. So I think I like the Rams, especially being in LA. I feel really good about the Rams. I have them winning 31-23. I could see Washington maybe getting a big play or two here or there that leads to maybe some more points and maybe crossing that 19 points we've seen them struggle to get by, because they have games where they've scored well into the 20s and even hit 30. So I do think that they could find some points here against a average defense in the Rams, but something tells me the Rams defensive front is looking to have themselves a very good game against what is a porous offensive line protecting their quarterback. So Rams 31-23. I think it's going to be a good game, but I do feel LA. Next one, we have probably the ultimate trap game of the week as the San Francisco 49ers are hosted by the Arizona Cardinals in a game that the 49ers have literally no reason to lose other than just getting caught looking ahead. I don't know what you could do to, in your head, roll around the idea of the Cardinals upsetting here and giving me a good explanation for it as to why it should happen, unless it is literally just the 49ers are preparing for something down the road and not the game that is right in front of them. That's always a possibility, especially with the way this season has gone. Anyone can win in the NFL this year. At this point, I'm done writing teams off. It's very likely that any team could beat any team. I feel like I keep getting burned every time I write a team off. So even though I have teams getting maybe blown out score-wise, am I going to be shocked if they pull off an upset? Absolutely not, because we have seen a lot of good teams get blown out. We've seen a lot of good teams lose to teams they shouldn't be losing to. But if the 49ers are who we all think they are, and I personally think they're the best team in the NFL, they should be winning this game here. I would love to know the mental gymnastics of how you think the Cardinals upset here. Please let me know in the comments, but I have San Francisco winning very handedly, 38-13, very similar to the routing they had the first time they took down the Cardinals. Next game, this is probably the game of the week for everyone, myself included here, and one of the most exciting games I think we've had all season. Even though the Bills are only 7-6, we have two statistical heavyweights battling it out in Buffalo as the Cowboys are hosted by the Bills. And when I say statistical heavyweights, I mean, like, listen to the numbers on this here. In terms of points per game scored, both are top 5 units. The Cowboys 1, the Bills 5. In terms of points per game allowed, both are top 10 units. The Cowboys 4th, the Bills 6th. In terms of passing yards per game, both are top 5 units. The Cowboys 2nd, the Bills 5th. In terms of rushing yards per game on offense, both are sitting right at the top 10. Cowboys right outside at number 11, but Bills are at 10, Cowboys are at 11. Both teams very capable of forcing mistakes on defense. Buffalo has 23 takeaways. The Dallas Cowboys have 21. In terms of third down conversion rate, the Cowboys, number 1 in the NFL at 49.2%. The Bills at 48.8%. Both of these teams, especially on offense, can be very dangerous. And it feels like since Joe Brady has taken over, we've seen a better form of the Bills in recent weeks. However, the one thing that stands out to me between these two teams that I think is going to be the difference maker here in a game like this where you have two really good teams that are going to go head to head, Buffalo currently sits at 21 total turnovers this year on offense. Whereas when you look at Cowboys, best in the NFL, they have only 11. That is where I start to look at this game and I go, I'm kind of feeling the Cowboys a little bit more. I think 3 questions that get answered in this game kind of decide who comes out victorious. Which defense gets the big stop, whether it's in a 4th down situation, late in the 4th quarter, something along those lines. Who makes the costly mistake, whether it's an unlikely scenario based off of the Cowboys' performance this season. Maybe the offense has a bad turnover late in the game, or the Bills, known for their offensive issues, throws an untimely turnover, as they have at many points this season. And who wins on third down? You have the 2 best third down teams in the NFL right now, and whoever can keep their offense on the field and their opponent's offense off the field should find themselves in a better position to win. As for who I think comes out victorious, I think this is a really good game here, and I was pretty surprised to see the Cowboys as underdogs. And I'm going to take Dallas. Give me the Cowboys. I know that their road record is 3-3, all 7 wins at home, undefeated there, but 3-3 on the road, so you're like 50-50 so far. But the way these two teams match up and just where Buffalo and Dallas is as a whole right now, there is a lot of momentum coming out of Dallas. And Buffalo, while squeaking out that victory, and a good victory at that, over the Kansas City Chiefs last week, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep pace with the Cowboys. Maybe they do, but I'm definitely feeling the Cowboys on this one. So give me the Cowboys 27-23. Looking at Sunday Night Football, we're looking at Baltimore being hosted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. As Baltimore continues to just find ways to win, the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of feel like on the opposite end, finding random ways to lose every other week or so, sitting at 8-5. Now, here's the deal. Baltimore's a run-first team, first and foremost. Obviously, they are the best rushing attack in the NFL at 157 yards per game. The Jaguars, pretty stout run defense for the majority of the season. However, we have seen them struggle against other teams that are very good at running the football, and I feel like the 49ers are a prime example of that. They allowed 144 yards on the ground in that game, and that one ended up being a routing. I look at Baltimore as kind of like the AFC's version of the 49ers in terms of run first, open up the pass second, and then the passing attack can kind of take over as the game progresses. But Baltimore, another one of those teams that can run the football really, really well. The other thing I'm concerned about is just the folding that we see from the Jaguars sometimes offensively, especially considering the way Trevor Lawrence looked playing on that high ankle sprain last week. I felt like that was not a great game on his part, and just for the passing game altogether, it was not great. They averaged, I think they hit, not average, but they hit like 220 some odd yards through the air, just not quite what we're used to seeing out of Trevor Lawrence. He airmailed some passes that went right to defensive backs' hands. It was not pretty. And when you've seen this team go up against some better defenses, obviously, as I mentioned with the Browns, they had 4 turnovers last week, still put up 27 points, but the 4 turnovers ultimately cost them. Then you look at 2 other defenses that are pretty damn good in the NFL that they went up against. They had 221 total yards of offense and only 3 points against the 49ers, and then 271 yards of offense and 9 points against the Chiefs. I don't know how this team will fare against the Ravens defense when you consider that they're the second best in terms of points per game allowed at just under 17. I am a little bit worried about Jacksonville in this one here, coupled with the fact that even at home, not really a home field advantage type of thing. They're sitting at 3-4. They've struggled to get their wins in front of their fans, and that's kind of disappointing considering how good the Jaguars have been for a majority of the season. I will say that if there's one thing the Jaguars can do to try to mitigate what Baltimore has been doing offensively, and I think it's very important they do so, they need to win on third down. They've got to get the Ravens off the field, both get them off the field, but also win on third down offensively. They have the third best run. They have the 6th best run defense on third down, is what I was trying to say, in the NFL, allowing teams to convert on only 35.4% of tries. And the Ravens are 9th in the NFL in converting third downs at 42.7%. So if you can win on third down on defense, get the Ravens off the field, you have a shot. But not only that, you need to convert on third down yourselves and keep the Ravens off the field. That is your best bet, keeping the Ravens offense off the field as much as possible. I do like the Ravens in this one. I'm going to take the Ravens 26-20. But if Jacksonville can just focus in and keep Baltimore's offense off the field, play keep away, maybe try to find some success running the football. They only average about 99 yards a game on the ground right now, so if they can get the ball rolling a little bit more, just keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson and company's hands, you have a shot. But I like the Ravens. I have them winning 26-20. It's just really hard for me to buy Jacksonville right now, all things considered. And then finally, we're looking at Monday Night Football. Really fun matchup here between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Seattle Seahawks. And I say really fun matchup because both of these teams, in the situation that they are in, could lead to a very high-scoring, lot of offensive production type of game. And here is why. Both teams in a kind of a must-win situation, first and foremost. It's a get-right game for Philly after back-to-back losses. And then on top of that, Seattle, with playoff hopes still alive, they got to win this game to get back to 500. Seattle, since losing Kenneth Walker, have struggled to run the football, and it seems like he might be back this week. If he is, he'd be a very welcomed addition. And the reason I say that is because what was once a strength has become even more of a weakness than I think the passing defense has been for Philadelphia. In the last 4 games, Philadelphia has allowed 155 yards per game on the ground. 155 yards. That is ludicrous. That is a football field and a half of rushing yards that they're allowing per game. On top of that, on the flip side of things, Philadelphia and their fans all clearly want to see the Eagles run the football a lot more. And I am with them on that. I think that when the Eagles are rolling and doing things well, they're typically running the football a lot, often, and effectively. Seattle themselves have not been much better over roughly that same span. Honestly, maybe even worse defending the run. They have been allowing in their last 3 games 159 yards rushing per game. So there is a good chance that we see some offenses running wild. And on top of that, both of these defenses are not very good against the pass. The Eagles allow 259 yards per game. The Seahawks sit at 243. Both of those are 25th or worse. I am expecting a lot of yards, both on the ground, through the air, and I think we're going to see a lot of points in this matchup. Coupled that with the fact that I think Philadelphia has been hurting since their Bills game, and it feels like they might be getting a little bit healthier as of late. this is a good opportunity for a bounce back for them. The Seahawks are in must-win situation if they want to stay within the NFC playoff race. As for who I think is going to win, in a shootout, an exciting affair on Monday Night Football, and I'm glad to say that because some Monday night games have been downright awful this year, as have some Thursdays. I have the Eagles winning 31-28. This is a kind of a coin flip game for me because the Eagles have been in a rough spot, and I wouldn't walk away from this game very surprised if the Eagles pull off the upset. But I do think that the Eagles are the more talented team, and I trust in what they have at quarterback, at wide receiver a little bit more, even though there are some really great receivers in Seattle. And as for the defenses right now, I don't really know whose defense I would take more because both of them have downright sucked the last 3 to 4 weeks. So I'll take the Eagles in a shootout 31-28. But those are my picks for week number 15 of the NFL. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me hear your picks, your thoughts on my picks. I'm sorry my voice, if it sounds like it's shot. This is the second time I'm recording this for you all. So if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.